Today, Monday, November 22nd, 2004.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And welcome to Today on this, is it already Monday morning? I'm Katie Couric.
And I'm Matt Lauer. Did you get to see much of this videotape?
I saw a lot of it on the news throughout the weekend because it got played and replayed, but I haven't even had a chance to really watch it closely.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. Ron Artest of the Indiana Pacers racing into the stands after a spectator hit him with a drink. That set off basically a riot. Artest has now been suspended for the rest of the season, and other players involved will also be sitting out for weeks, all, by the way, without pay. We're going to have more on that story.
Right, it's not very sportsmanlike, and the punishment may not stop there. A Michigan DA is considering charges against some players and fans. We're going to talk with him this morning and ask NBC's Bob Costas about what seems to be a very disturbing trend in professional sports. Also, I had a setback for the president over the weekend when members of his own party blocked the passage of a bill that would have overhauled the nation's intelligence agencies. Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge will give us his reaction later in this half hour.
Then a story you have not heard about in Iraq. We're going to introduce you to a 72-year-old great-grandmother who's getting ready to be deployed there. Also, we'll talk to a 14-year-old boy attacked by a tiger in Florida over the weekend. And then we're going to shift gears. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld will stop by to tell us about the new DVD that has Seinfeld fans everywhere anxious to do some double dipping.
That's on my Christmas list this year. And he's Country Music's Entertainer of the Year, Kenny Chesney, who's got a lot of fans who have congregated on the plaza already, will be performing live a bit later on. He's cute.
Okay.
And talented. But first, let's get the morning's top stories from Ann Curry, who's at the news desk. Ann, good morning.
Katie, Matt, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Today, the NBA Players Union is expected to appeal mass suspensions handed down after a brawl in Michigan during a game between the Pacers and the Pistons. It was one of the most violent clashes between players and fans in U.S. sports history. NBC's Kevin Cork reports.
The punishment was swift and severe. Ron Artest suspended for the remainder of the season. In all, 9 players will miss a combined total 140 games without pay for their part in the brawls. NBA Commissioner David Stern.
We have to make the point that there are boundaries in our games, and that one of those boundaries, which has always been but is hereby announced to be immutable, is the boundary that separates the fans from the court.
Many fans returning to the arena for the first time since that fight agreed with Stern. To them, the players got what they deserved.
I think it was fair because, I mean, they jumped in the crowd and they started hitting people. You can't just do that. Well, I feel it was pretty fair.
For our test, I feel it's fair. The other guys, they should have known better. For Wallace, I think that's a little harsh.
There was a visible increase in security at the game, an effort to ensure that what led to the suspensions doesn't happen again. Kevin Cork, NBC News, Auburn Hills, Michigan.
A Minnesota man is in custody this morning accused of killing 5 hunters in Wisconsin and wounding 3 others.
At your latest weather, Matt.
All right, Al, thanks very much. On Close-Up this morning, basket brawl. There's more fallout this morning from that ugly fight between players and fans at Friday night's NBA game between the Detroit Pistons and the Indiana Pacers. As we reported, the NBA has handed down record suspensions, and now authorities in Michigan are also considering criminal charges. David Gorsica is the prosecutor in Oakland County, Michigan. Bob Costas, of course, is an NBC sports anchor. Good morning to both of you.
Hi, Matt. Good morning.
Mr. Gorsica, let me start with you. You've seen the videotape, I'm sure. It seems like it's a pretty good piece of evidence. When will you decide if you'll hand down criminal charges?
Well, that videotape will be our strongest evidence, and we will be meeting this morning later on with the Auburn Hills Police Department. You have to think of the logistical nightmare that we have in identifying some of these fans and eyewitnesses and perpetrators. We have security cameras that we have to review, Palace Vision, which is an internal camera system, ESPN footage, security reports, police reports, eyewitness accounts, and put it all together and ferret out the truth to figure out who we're going to charge and what we're going to charge.
Mr. Gorsica, in terms of the letter of the law, does what constitutes illegal behavior differ between fans and players?
No, it doesn't differentiate between whether you're a multi-million-dollar basketball player or an average fan in the stands.
So a player throws a punch and a fan throws a punch, that's assault either way?
Either way, the law does not distinguish between the two.
And what about inciting the fight? In other words, does the throwing of a drink rise to the same level as the throwing of a punch?
In the strictest sense, it does constitute assault and battery to throw a projectile and strike someone. We have identified, in fact, that individual who threw that container or cup that struck our test in the chest area. We are going to go out and seek to obtain a statement from him. We know who he is. We've made contact with him. We want to bring him in for further questioning, but the other individual, we are seriously about attempting to obtain and identify as the individual whom threw the chair, which would constitute a felonious assault, which is a 4-year felony.
Bob, let me turn to you. You've been covering sports for a long time. Compare this, rank it in terms of what you've seen over the course of your career.
Well, it isn't as bad as European or South American soccer riots, but in the United States, it's one of the ugliest, perhaps the ugliest in a major sport fan-player incident I've ever seen.
Let's talk about the penalties handed down by the commissioner, David Stern. He suspended Ron Artest for the entire season, no pay. He's gone. Stephen Jackson, Jermaine O'Neal, 30 and 25 games respectively. Do the penalties fit the crime?
Well, Artest's past history has to factor into this. This is obviously an unstable young man who has been guilty of many belligerent and irrational acts, so that factors in. And also his concern, Commissioner Stern's concern, about the image of the league. Not long ago, the NBA had a great image. It was soulful, it was stylish, it was progressive, it was hip in the best sense of that term. Now they have too many players in this league whose actions and attitudes bespeak kind of a thug mentality. It's not the majority, but it's enough to certainly be noticed, and that doesn't appeal to reasonable people. It's turning off a good portion of the fan base. And so Commissioner Stern had to make a statement here that the league, without any ambivalence at all, stands foursquare against this. There's always the possibility that upon appeal, these penalties could be reduced. Latrell Sprewell got a substantial penalty years ago for choking his coach, but that penalty actually was reduced. It was still a whole lot of time, but it was reduced. I think what Stern is thinking about here is, I better lay down the most extreme penalty that I reasonably can, and then even if it is reduced, it'll still be substantial.
So you think, though, in the future, then a player who even contemplates going into the stands and throwing a punch at a fan is going to say, wait a second, this is a year-ender.
Yep. If not, he's nuts.
What about the fans, Bob? I mean, they have to have had some role in this. I mean, You've been to arenas. You know that civility is hard to come by in sporting arenas these days. What's created this situation?
Well, there's a whole tone of belligerence and incivility in the whole culture. And it's some kind of witch's brew, and you can't necessarily say this proportion goes to this factor and this to that. But part of it, I think, is the whole reality TV thing where people think they have a right to participate somehow and be on camera.
But in
not
a
just
sporting
watch.
arena in the future, if someone is hurling insults, do you think the ownership is going to have to go take that person out of the arena and bar them?
Yeah, especially if it's profane and provocative and not within the realm of what we generally accept as people just having a good time and letting their emotions blow off a little bit.
Real quickly, Bob, the next day, South Carolina-Clemson football game, there was an ugly fight on the field. Tommy Bowden, the head coach of Clemson, said, hey, you can't blame, you know, these players have been watching 24-hour coverage of what happened in the basketball game a day ago. That contributed. You buy that?
To some extent. Again, you can't say to what extent, but it's that whole attitude, the whole attitude of belligerence and people getting in one another's face that permeates the whole culture, and certainly sports is an exempt from it. One quick point, Matt. In the aftermath of this, I heard some of the most inane commentary I've ever heard, including that Artest was entitled to defend himself. No one's defending these fans. They should be prosecuted to the extent that they can be identified. But he wasn't defending himself. He was retaliating. There's a big, big difference. He's the guy who threw the match in the tinderbox. If he doesn't go in the stands, there is no riot.
All right, Bob Costas, Dave Gorsica. Gentlemen, thanks very much. To be continued, as they say. 13 minutes after the hour, here's Kate.